Well, good afternoon. Wow. Wow. Yay, you. Yay, you. Oh, yay, you. Wow. Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being who you are and being members of, the body of Christ, the church. But a better way to say it, being part of the Jesus movement in the world. Thank you for that, for being the Jesus movement. And I just thank the design team and everybody who's planned this and worked on it, and for our MCs. Where did the two MCs go? There you are, okay. Our MCs and all of the young people who are here, your leaders and support folk, and your bishops. Bishop Gates is here somewhere, and Bishop Harris is parking a car. There they are. So it's great to be with all of you, to see some old friends and meet some new ones, and to be in this wonderful cathedral. It really is it's a real blessing to be here and to spend some time with you and with the people of this diocese and the church here. This is our time, and it's your time, and so I'll just say a little bit to get us going. And then we'll have time for any questions that you may have. And what is the procedure? You just go to the microphone, is that it? Okay, and we'll do it that way. And I tell you, if I sound a little loopy, you know how people are when they sound a little loopy? I got a little foot problem, so I took some foot medicine. So if I just sort of ramble on, you'll think, okay, this is just the usual sermon. Or you say, thank you, Bishop, we've had enough of that. It's one of the real joys and real blessings is to be a follower of Jesus today, and it's not always easy. Frankly, those of us who have been around a little while, living life itself is wonderful, but it has its ups and downs. I don't know about y'all, but there's some good days and there's some bad ones. And there's some wonderful ones when it's just sunny and beautiful and you want to go out and sunbathe. Well, I don't sunbathe, but, sunbathe. And then other days when it's cloudy, overcast, and cold, and you just don't want to go anywhere. Well, that's just how life is. Sometimes it's up and sometimes it's down. That's just the nature of life. And we all make it through because we make it through together. One of the blessings for me has been to be a follower of Jesus of Nazareth. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in the religion business and I get paid to say it. I mean, I actually do, which is really kind of cool in and of itself. But anyway, but because it really does matter. And it matters because this Jesus had something to say and has something to give. And had something to say that has made a difference in the life of this world, made a difference in mine. And a lot of the people that I've looked up to over the course of my life, who've actually made a difference in my life and in the life of the world, a lot of those people did so because they were following what Jesus has taught us. And so be a part of that movement that Jesus began. I've been going around the church saying, there's nothing wrong with institutions. Institutions can do good things, believe me. But the truth is, the church is not simply an institution. Jesus started a movement of people who were committed to following his way of love as the way of life. And that movement changed the world once upon a time, and it can do it again. And you are part of that Jesus movement. And so to be a part of that, we need you to follow his way of love and to help us change this world. So that's why I really am glad to be here with y'all. This is a good-looking movement. It's a good-looking movement. And we're here for your conversation. And, there's that sister who was singing. Lord, that's one thing about movements. Let me tell you. Movements got folk can sing. Folk who can sing. Lord. Oh, yeah. This is the actual truth. I was at the Apollo Theater in New York several months ago. And which was actually, the Apollo Theater is a historic theater. Stevie Wonder, before he was Stevie Wonder, when he was little Stevie, Saw him on TV the other night. He's not Little Stevie anymore. He's big. But anyway, but when he was Little Stevie, performed on the stage of the Apollo Theater. And this was in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I was kind of the sermon at the end, but they had a woman who was a singer like you, and it was her singing. She was there on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, 1955. And it was her singing like yours. When I walked in and heard you singing, it was that singing that helped them march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge when their lives were in danger. And it was singing like yours that the Spirit used to give folk the courage to stand up for love. You keep on singing, sister. Keep on singing, and we'll keep on marching. We keep on marching. Amen. So what are you all thinking about? It's your turn. Gather around the microphones. You can ask me anything you want. Somebody want to get us kicked? Oh, here we go. Good. Good for you. Come on. And if it's a really hard question, I'll find Bishop Gates. He's right over there. And then we'll just redirect. Yes, tell us who you are. And then.
Hi, I'm Grace.
Say it again?
I'm Grace.
Hello, Grace.
How old were you when you wanted to become a priest, and what made you want to become a priest?
What a great question. Did you hear the question? How old was I when I wanted to become a priest, and what made me want to become a priest? Well, I think I flirted with it when I was a little kid. I did, because my dad was a priest, and so when I was a little kid, you just want to be like your daddy. I mean, there was part of that, I think, going on. And then as I got older, I was an acolyte when I was 5 years old. Any acolytes in here? Oh, yeah, we got some. All right. Oh, we're doing all right. Okay. Yep, I was an acolyte when I was 5 years old, and so the idea was sort of there. Maybe the germ, the seed was planted, but then I wandered off and didn't really think about it as time went on. And when I went off to school, went off to college. I went to college. I mean, I always wanted to do something that was going to matter in the lives of people and in the life of society. I mean, I wanted to do something. And I really I actually was a volunteer. Have you heard of Robert Kennedy? Y'all know that name? Okay. All right, well, when Robert Kennedy he had been Attorney General, but then he ran for the Senate, U.S. Senate, in the state of New York. And I lived in Buffalo, New York. It's the home of the Buffalo Bills. I know, well, that's the team the Patriots practice beating up on. And then they go win Super Bowls. That's right. And so I actually volunteered. I mean, in those days you licked envelopes and stamps and in the campaign offices, and then you would go door to door with campaign literature. Social media didn't exist yet, so you had to get out there and do it door to door. And I volunteered on my own. My parents let me do it for his first campaign for Senate and later campaign. And he was kind of one of many of my kind of heroes, people I kind of looked up. And I remember something he said, he said it often. He was quoting George Bernard Shaw when he said, "Some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream things that never were and ask why not." Why not a world where poverty is history? Why not a world where children do not suffer anymore? Why not a world where everyone has equal education and equal opportunity? Why not a world where war is no more? I heard that as, I don't know, probably 10 years old, I'm guessing, or no, 10th grade maybe. And it stayed with me. And so when I went off to college, I was thinking maybe that's a way to do it. And so I was thinking about becoming a lawyer and going, doing all that's involved in that. And then midway through, this is probably longer than you wanted, Grace, but that's the danger of asking a preacher a question. You get more than you want. Anyway, about midway through, I took a course that I had to read a number of things, but one of the things I read was an essay by Dr. Martin Luther King. And I think that began a journey, a conscious or an unconscious journey, where I started to think about maybe the ministry was a way that I could also impact and make a difference with my life in the world, and that was already part of the world I was a part of, and that got me thinking about it. And I remembered I actually heard Dr. King preach once. Well, actually, I shouldn't say I heard him. I was present when he preached. He came to Buffalo, I think I was about 4 or 5, and my daddy took me to hear him preach. And, well, he came and there were a lot of preachers. And I don't know if you know about preachers, but they like to talk. I don't know anything about that personally, but I've heard well, before Dr. King ever got up, everybody else got up, and every preacher had to preach. It was like they all had to show how they could preach. So every preacher got up and preached, and there was singing and preaching. I was 4 or 5 years old. I went to sleep about halfway through it. I never heard Dr. King preach because I slept right through his sermon. So it was kind of nice to actually grow up a little bit in college and read what he actually was saying. And in time, quite literally, this is honest to God truth. I said this morning at the 2030s gatherings. I was doing a senior's honors thesis, and the school made it possible for me to come to Boston University, where the King papers were being kept. They hadn't been digitalized then. This is in the 70s, mid-70s, and the King papers were there. He did his doctoral dissertation. I actually read the actual dissertation was there. Physically, they let you actually thumb through the pages. It's now digitalized and everything, but then it was, you had to just read the actual thing and some of his other writings. And it was there that I really started to think, maybe I could make a difference in my life and others, actually being somebody who spreads the good news of Jesus of Nazareth, his teachings about the way of love and the way of life. And that's what set me on my journey. And there was a chaplain at my school I started talking with, and eventually I went on to seminary and became a priest. That's the long answer, Grace. I know you didn't. That's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you guys have any more questions, we'll walk around with the mic if it's easier for you guys.
Oh, that's good. Yes.
Hi, my name is Rhiannon. My question is, what do you think of God being the Father and mankind, or men kind of ruling instead of it being equal gender? Okay.
Oh, good question. Okay. Well, if I answer this question wrong, I'm going to get a lot of email on Monday. Thank you. There's a story in the New Testament where Jesus was in a conversation with a woman he met. Sometimes she's called the Samaritan woman at the well. And the two of them, it's in the 4th chapter of John's Gospel, and the two of them got in this conversation, and it's the most extraordinary conversation. And at one point, Jesus says to her, because she was a Samaritan, which was kind of a Jewish tradition, but it was just a different way of being Jewish. And he was more a Palestinian Jew, and it was a different way of being Jewish. So they didn't necessarily come from two groups that agreed with each other. That's a good way to say it. And then Jesus, in the midst of their conversation, says, you worship on Mount Gerizim, which was sacred and important to the Samaritans, and we worship on Mount Zion, Jerusalem. I mean, those are the places we consider holy. And then it's almost as Jesus says, it's not about whether you're on Mount Gerizim and I'm on Mount Zion. He says God is spirit. And those who worship God in spirit and in truth. We speak of God, our Father who art in heaven, because we can't get directly to God who is spirit. Our minds don't wrap around it. So we need something that helps us say God is like the loving, wonderful Father everybody wants. God is like, so call him, actually one of the biblical words, Jesus used it over and over, was Abba, which means daddy. When you say our Father who art in heaven, it's like saying, Papa, Daddy, who art in heaven. The prophet Isaiah, in the Hebrew scriptures, I think it's in chapter 65, if I remember, it's toward the end of Isaiah, actually says, God, you are like a mother. He says, God, you are like the nurse. God, you are like the mother who welcomes us to her. Jesus, on another occasion, said, God, as he was approaching Jerusalem before Palm Sunday, he said, God is like a mother hen who wants to gather her chicks, her brood, under her wings. So that the Bible speaks of God as our Father, but it also speaks of God as our mother, because ultimately God is spirit. And what our tradition is trying to show us is that God loves us so passionately It is like the mother we all dream of, like the father we all dream of. That God is the parent, the one who is the source of all of us. And I actually like to go around the church and say, you know what? Guess what? We all got the same mama. And we got the same daddy, which means we are meant to be family and take care of each other. We are sisters and brothers and siblings of one another. And that's what the language of our faith is trying to help us to see and to know that God loves us like an incredible parent. What a good question. I hope I won't get in trouble for that, but I'm glad you asked it. Thank you. There you go. Hello.
Hi, my name is Mia.
Uh-huh.
How did it feel to hear Martin Luther King talk?
Oh. You know, did you hear a question? It was, how did it feel to hear Martin Luther King talk? What a wonderful question. You know, he was a wonderful man. I mean, I didn't know him, you know, he didn't say, hey, Mike, and I said, hey, Marty. I mean, we didn't know each other quite like that. I just heard him physically that one time. But he was one person among many. There were many people like him who aren't as famous as a Martin Luther King, but there were men and women like him who were just normal people. I mean, they made mistakes. I mean, they were normal people, but they allowed God to use them to do some wonderful and extraordinary things. We live in a country that we've got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do. But I can tell you we've made a lot of progress. I've seen this country change. I was born in 1953. That was a year before Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, when the Supreme Court really pushed America in the trajectory of equal opportunity in public education. I've seen this country change for the good. And it's people like Martin Luther King. Everybody knows about him because of his speaking. He was really quite something. But there were other people. I've got to tell you a story. You know the speech where he's at the Washington Monument, at the Lincoln Monument, Lincoln Memorial in Washington. And I have a dream. You know that I have a dream one day. You all know that. And that's probably. Well, he did a lot of other speeches, but he was actually speaking. And they had told all the preachers, because they knew they had a bunch of preachers, that you only had 5 minutes. And they knew that, as it says in the Bible, one day for God is like 1,000. and so preachers are kind of like that. So they knew if they gave them 5 minutes, they'd take 10. So each of them, they had a short period. And so Dr. King was up there speaking before he ever did the I Have a Dream or anything. And he was giving he was a PhD. He was a professor type, actually, in his bones. And so he was giving kind of a learned dissertation on equal rights and both what that means theologically and spiritually. And he was articulating the importance that the scriptures say all people are created in God's image and likeness. It says that in Genesis 1. And therefore, all people are created by God, which means they are all created equal. And it was a very learned, and people were going to sleep. And then it was Mahalia Jackson, who was sitting not far from him, and she knew that sermon was like, that ship was sinking. And she said, Martin, tell him about the dream. And it was at that, when he heard that, he kicked into the I Have a Dream speech that we all know now, that he used to say around the country, and he kicked in I Have a Dream that one day, and America heard a speech that now is part of the pantheon with Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, with malice toward none and charity toward all. The now is with the words of Thomas Jefferson. God created all equal and has endowed us with certain inalienable rights, that among these are the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now in the pantheon of great words that have actually made a difference. But it was because Mahalia Jackson was sitting back there and said, Martin, tell him what's on your heart. Tell him about the dream. And then he gave America its dream. Thank you that's a wonderful question. Thank you.
So, hello, how are you?
I am fine, just getting a glass of water. Thank you.
So, I go to a public school, and sometimes when people ask me, what religion are you, Harriet? My name is Harriet, by the way.
Oh, Harriet? Okay.
Harriet, yeah. I say, I believe in Jesus Christ, and well, I don't recite the Nicene Creed or anything, but but they, they tend to be maybe a little mean about it sometimes.
Really?
And I was wondering, how would you be more empathetic towards people who maybe don't have the same thought process as you when it comes to Jesus and the church? And how would you be, practice, saying to them, it's fine to believe whatever you believe, and really making sure that that amendment right is within their reach.
No, that's a great question. Another one that I will get in trouble for if I answer it the wrong way by tomorrow. You guys are really good. I think that there's a quick and simple way to address that in your own heart, but actually for others. I believe, or I'm a follower or a disciple, whatever your words are. I follow Jesus Christ, and he teaches us that love is the way to life. To love God, to love your neighbor. And he says, love your neighbor as yourself, and to love yourself. And that is his way. And as a follower of Jesus, my job is to love like Jesus. To love God, to love my neighbor, and while I'm at it, love myself. And that love is big enough to embrace and contain people who may agree or disagree. And that means that love and that way of love is so gracious and so good that there's room for you even if you disagree with me, or room for me even if I'm different from you. And that makes it possible for all of us to be what God dreams for us to be. Does that make a little sense? What I just said to her, I said 2 weeks ago on Capitol Hill to members of the United States Senate. No, they listened. Well, no, they were, yeah. Well, the ones that were there were mostly Episcopalian, so they already agreed. So it was, but it's the same message. It's the same message for us all, that the way of love, and this is not schmaltzy, I mean, that kind of love is nice. I mean, it's okay. I mean, this is the kind of love that's not selfish, that is sacrificial. It is Jesus carrying the cross on Good Friday, not for himself, but because he cares about others. That's the way of Jesus. And I think the more we claim that as who we are and what it is to be a follower of Jesus, then it makes space, and then you might have space for a conversation about faith with somebody else. It kind of lowers their defenses, lowers yours, and just said, it's not my job to convert you. That's God's job. My job is just to share the faith that I have, which is Jesus and his way of love. That's a question Episcopalians are asking, but adult Episcopalians are afraid to ask me that. I'm not kidding you. It's really true. I hope that answers a little bit. You just love. Oh, just call us the Love Church. Don't be ashamed to be a church that's known as a church that's committed to love. Because I'm here to tell you, we need some love in this world. We all need it. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you. Who goes next? Oh, over here? Oh, okay. Then we'll come to you. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Meredith, and so I read the news a lot, and there are a bunch of bad problems, and I was wondering, how does that make you feel? Because
there are a lot of bad problems. There really are. And, we won't solve everything in our lifetime, but we can solve some things. And I used to say when I was out, Father J. James is sitting right there. When I was in the Diocese of North Carolina, I used to tell folk, we can't do everything, but we can do something. And our job is to do the something that we can do that actually makes a difference for the good. And that, because if you think about everything, it's too big. But if you think about something, you can manage it. That's life when you have problems and you feel like, gosh, there's so much going on. Sometimes it's just helpful to think about what's the one thing that I can address, that I can make a difference on. Because it makes what may be a mountain, it makes the mountain manageable. And so I think the more each of us makes a commitment and a decision, I can't do everything, but I can do something. And I can do something with others who can do that something. And then when we come together and work on that something, whatever that happens to be, it can make a difference in the long run. And sometimes changing things takes a long time. It does. Sometimes it takes a long time. But I'm here to tell you things can be changed. When I didn't actually know this until I was grown, but my daddy always walked with a limp. And we never really knew why. He never talked about it. Never talked about it at all. We didn't know why he walked. And there used to be a TV show called Gunsmoke. And there was a character, some folk may remember Chester. Remember Chester? There was a guy named Chester. And he said, "Hey, Matt Dillon." He used to walk around. It was a silly show. But anyway, that was on TV. We only had 3 stations back then in PBS: CBS, ABC, NBC, and PBS. That was really it. And we had rabbit ears. We used to sit on the TV. Have you seen any of this? You sit on TV, and if you weren't getting enough of a signal, what you would do is put tin foil on the top of it to kind of help to get the signal. Anyway, so Daddy, we used to joke about, he used to walk, and his nickname was Chester, and he always walked like that. Well, I didn't know until he was much older, and he had gotten sick at this point, but he was much older, and I was with my Aunt Carrie, and we were sitting in his medical room, and she started singing to him. She was singing Amazing Grace, and she had a terrible voice, but she's now in the heavenly choir, so I'm sure it's a much better voice. But so she was kind of singing Amazing Grace and rubbing his legs. And I said, "Why are you doing that?" And she said, "This is what Mama used to do when he was a little boy." And I didn't know why. I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "You didn't know your daddy had polio." And there was some kind of liniment that people would have you put on, and they would rub your legs, and then they would wrap the legs for little children to help them learn how to walk. He recovered, and he always walked with a limp, but he walked, and he was a priest, and had a good life, had kids and everything. Well, his mother, my mother, his wife, had the kids, but anyway, he was. But so he went on to live a good life. But today, there are very few children that have to have polio. Because there was a guy, I believe, whose name was Johannes Salk. And he and other researchers worked for years to find a cure and a vaccine for polio. It took them a long time, but it happened. Same thing is true not just with diseases. Same thing is true with problems that we face in our society. We got problems. There's a mountain of them. Don't try to solve the mountain. Find the problem or the thing that you can work on and work on with other people. And I'm here to tell you, things can change. Some men see things as they are and ask why. We see things that never were and say, why not? Why not a cure for polio? Why not a better world? You just keep saying, I'd like to say we who follow Jesus, we are the why not people of God. We are stubborn, and we won't quit. And don't you quit either. Thank you. Thank you. Y'all are really good. Right here? Yeah, there you are.
So how do you think we should love God and build a better connection with God when we don't know him on the personal level that we do our family and friends in the way we love them?
Ooh. Once again, another question that I'm going to get email about tomorrow morning. That's a great question. It really is, that really is a significant question. I have a theory that that one of the reasons Jesus came was that God had been trying to tell us and show us this way of love for a long time. I mean, he'd been trying. Go back in the Bible. That's what the Old Testament or the Hebrew or Jewish scriptures about. God's trying to, in different ways, you know. And, you know, it tries to do it in the stories that are there. Tried to do it with Moses. Y'all know about Moses? You know about Moses? You know, Moses and setting Hebrew slaves free? Help me, somebody. You know about Moses? Okay, all right. Yeah, there's a song. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, and tell old Pharaoh, let my people go. Well, God was trying to show people that I put you there to love each other, to love me and love each other. And Moses was showing that by helping to set some folk who were slaves free. And people got it for a little while, and then they forgot. And then God said, let me try another. I'll just keep finding people who can lead it. And then there were different leaders. There was a Joshua. There was a Deborah. Deborah used to sit under the palm tree, the Bible says. And she would judge with justice and righteousness the people of Israel. God kept sending judges like Deborah, wise folk like King Solomon, people of integrity like Queen Esther, prophets like Isaiah. I'm taking you through the whole Bible. And it's like what God was doing is that God kept trying to say, I keep telling you, love me, love each other, and take care of each other in this world. I'm telling you, that's the way. And he would send prophets like Amos and Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Zephaniah and Obadiah and Nahum. There's some of these Jewish prophets even the rabbis don't know about. I mean, God kept sending folk, trying everything he could. And finally, my theory is God said, you know something? I'm just going to come down there myself. And that's Jesus. I think Jesus was trying to do exactly what you're asking for in the life of a human person, somebody who lives where we lived, sits where we sit. In the life, somebody said Jesus is the human face of God. Maybe one way is to remember that when you read about Jesus, you're listening to God. When Jesus says you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, that's actually God talking. It's God coming here and trying to get as close as he can and saying, I'm here with you. But there's one other way. Jesus actually said, wherever 2 or 3 gather together in my name, there I'm with them also. Which means when we draw close to each other and we actually love each other and care for each other, God himself is there. There's an old medieval hymn that says, where true love is found, God himself is there. So wherever you see love, even bigger than hatred, love that really cares when it's easy not to care, God is there. There's God all around. You can't see God, but you can't see oxygen either, and you breathe it. Where true love is found, God himself is there. Hope that helps a little bit. Oh, thank you. That's a great. Bishop Harris is getting me. Okay. It's okay. Here we go. No. There. Bend it. Okay. There we go. I think we're good. We're good? Thanks, everybody. Yes, hello.
My name is Kit.
Get a little closer.
My name is Kit.
Uh-huh.
And how was the royal wedding and stuff?
I have been waiting for that question. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, she was asking how was the royal wedding? I don't know. I wasn't there. It was no, I'm kidding. It was really, the wonderful thing about it, that really was true. They are two pretty special people because they come from different worlds. completely different worlds, which was kind of why everybody kind of stood up and took notice. And yet, they really are very normal people. They really are. He's a prince. That's real. And yeah, she's beautiful, and that's real. And you see the two of them together, and everybody just sits there and looks at the two of them and goes, "Ah." And yet, they did something that actually goes back to love. Somebody asked me about God being present. I've lost you, but where is she? Oh, back here. Hey, they actually did. I think we experienced God at that wedding. I really do. I didn't think about it till afterward. But afterward, and I didn't know what impact the wedding had, or, I was nervous I just didn't want to, I was afraid that I'd get up and do something that would embarrass the whole Episcopal Church, and it would be on TV all over the world. I actually had my handkerchief, and I kept it in my pocket so I wouldn't use it, because I figured if I even blew my nose, everybody was going to see me do it. And if you ever saw me go like this, it was like real quick, so I was trying not to, so I was nervous about that. But I really didn't until after the sermon and after the service and much later. I found out, they told me how many people actually watched it. And they said 2 billion people watched that wedding. And then I started having experiences with people, different kinds of people. The news people and all that. But I was running into people there were Christians and Muslims and Hindus and atheists and Jews and Sikhs. I was running into, especially at Heathrow Airport in London, you can run into everybody. And I was taking, all of a sudden, I discovered the selfie. I didn't, oh my Lord. In fact, I was taking selfies all the way through Heathrow Airport. I just wanted to come home. I just wanted to get back. And yet people wanted to take selfies. And I know there were all different kinds of people. I was taking selfies with people I agree with and people I disagree with. And then I got on TV shows. I was on MSNBC. They're as liberal can be. And then I was on Fox, and they're as conservative can be. And then I was on all these different shows with different people. And then I realized something happened, at least for a few moments at that wedding. The love between those two people actually brought different worlds together. It did. People who don't even agree with each other most of the time, which in itself is a parable about love. That love, the way of love, actually can bring us together. And that wedding, I think, for a few moments, was a miracle of the way of love. It was wonderful. And I'll tell you a secret, and this wasn't, oh, what's wrong? Oh, I saw y'all looking, yeah, that's better. Thank you. I didn't, you never know. The English are very discreet, and it's a different culture, and so I knew I wasn't preaching in front of an American congregation, even Episcopalians. They'll answer you if you really ask them. If you prompt them enough, they'll eventually. But in England, they don't do that in the Church of England. They may be thinking it, but they don't actually, all that. And so at one point during the sermon, I really was about to step out from the little preaching area, and I said, no, I don't think this gang is ready for that. I better just stay. I just said, let me just stay right here. But after the service was nearly over, and I think when the couple had walked out, they had processed out, Her Majesty, the Queen, leaves, and everybody waits for her. And I was kind of sitting like here, and she was actually crossing the altar. She was on that side, and she was crossing the altar. Nobody saw this. And actually, I haven't said this publicly, but I'll go ahead and tell you. Am I being broadcast? I guess it's okay. Oh, I'll get mail about this Monday morning too, but okay. So, anyway, she came across, and I was sort of standing here. And, I was watching but being respectful because, it was pretty. She's an incredible person, really. She is absolutely incredible. And I have to admit, I like the Star Spangled Banner, but God save our gracious Queen. That is really, that's really pretty. And so when everybody at the end of the service, stands up and sings that, it is just stirring. And then I remembered Lexington and Boston, and I said, so I say, oh, say, can you see by the... So anyway, I was standing here, and she was very gracious and came by, and I, was watching her, but trying not to be too obvious. But the cameras weren't on us. They were actually on the couple who were gone. And she came by, and she was looking straight ahead, and when she got where I was, she just looked like this and smiled and nodded. And I like to melted. I mean, it was like, oh, Your Majesty. I know we won the war, but we'll come back. We'll come back. And that wedding did little things like that. And it did it not just in England, but it did it here. Something about the love between the two of them became infectious for a moment. And they helped to give us a miracle. And now they got another little miracle on the way. I haven't heard anything about the baby being born, but actually they're probably not going to tell anybody the baby get born. They'll announce it 3 days later or something, probably. But that was a wonderful occasion and just neat to be at, and a nice day for, I think, the whole world. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gabriel, and I feel like I should know this, but what exactly do you do as a presiding bishop every day? I have no idea.
That is a great question. My youngest daughter, she says, well, I knew what you did when you were a parish priest. I kind of knew when you were the Bishop of North Carolina, sort of. I knew you went around and confirmed people. What do you do now? Well, what I really do now is I go around and ordain new bishops and make bishops. That's the big thing. And then what I really do is go around to talk to people and try to share the message of the love of God that Jesus teaches us about. And the church kind of has me on just kind of as a traveling evangelist to go around and spread that message wherever I can. That's it. Yeah, it's pretty good. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Gabriel. Yeah.
I'm David.
Hello, David.
So God says, love everyone as you love yourself. So from an atheist perspective here, I'm just wondering, how do you go about carrying on that mission when there's so much injustice and so much indifference in the world at this point?
That is a great question. And the one thing about, which I find remarkable about the message of love that Jesus was about, it applies to Christians, it applies to Jews, Muslims, theists, atheists, agnostic. To live a life grounded in love can be done by anybody. And maybe an atheist doesn't believe in God. That's okay, but you believe in us. So love us. And my experience of life is that people who love deeply enough will actually stumble and meet each other in the same place in the long run. Love is the answer to precisely the question you're asking. And it's the way that can bring us all together. Just do the loving thing, and you'll probably find yourself doing the right thing. Thank you. Hope that helped. Thank you. Yeah.
I just had a random question that I thought of on the way here. If the disciples wrote the Bible, wrote parts of the Bible, right? So how could they have written about Jesus' birth if they were around the same age of him being born somewhere around the same time?
Right. That's a really good question. And as I said, if I get a tough question, Bishop Gates, where are you? Oh, he left. Oh, good. The Bible, the whole Bible, there are more authors. We don't even know who all the writers were. There are numerous writers who wrote different parts, and they wrote parts at different times. But the Bible, before it was a written document, if you will, was actually oral traditions. People told the stories. And stories live for a long time and can be, anthropologists will tell you that the passing on of stories from generation to generation can be remarkably accurate in terms of their details. The Bible, the stories and the teachings and things that are in the Bible were actually stories that people told about events or things that had happened, and they kept telling the stories. And at some point, somebody wrote them down, both in the Jewish tradition in the Old Testament or Hebrew scriptures, and the same thing happens in the New Testament. At some point, the stories were written down. So there were stories about the birth of Jesus that the people who later wrote them down, they might not have been born themselves, but the oral stories eventually became written stories, and then some people edited them, if you will, and then eventually the synagogue, first with the Old Testament, and then the church with the New Testament, eventually figured out, we believe that these are the stories that will help us best know who Jesus was and know who God was and is. And that's how it kind of happens. So you have a whole lot of story floating, and then you have people telling the stories, and then you have somebody actually writing them down. They do that with my sermons too. Because they're rarely written down. Well, they're written down, but what actually is written and what gets said are two different things. And so I have a wonderful staff who, after it actually gets said, somebody takes the tape and they transcribe it. And then when you transcribe it, it looks a little funny, because it really does. Because if you listen to how you actually talk, it really is kind of, it's not grammatically correct. It's really strange. So then somebody has to clean that up, and they clean it up, and eventually they put it in a form, and it looks like an intelligent sermon. And somebody says, I was there, and I didn't hear that sermon. But that's kind of how the Bible came to be. Thank you. Thank you. It's a great question. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Donovan. I was just wondering, throughout your whole life, what was the biggest obstacle between you and your faith, and what motivated you to get through that?
What was the biggest obstacle between me and my faith and motivated me to get through? You know, I guess, there are a number of things, but someone earlier asked a similar question. It's very easy to get frustrated with the slowness of progress. It just is. That you want something to hurry up and change for the good. And yet the truth is, progress, which I believe human progress is moving in the direction of God's dream for us all. It's hard work. It sometimes takes a long time. I think that's part of what the story of Holy Week is about. It spits and starts. It's taking up a cross and carrying it. Jesus didn't run to the cross and say, oh, goody. No, it was hard. It was horrible. He fell. Somebody else had to pick up the cross for him and carry it. You know, that's actually in the story, which is a way of saying if Jesus couldn't carry it all by himself, neither can we. We got to pick up the cross for each other and help each other along and keep going, because eventually we'll get to that dream. But it's hard, and that has always been a struggle. And I've kind of learned that, well, one thing is you can't do it by yourself. You need other people to help you, and you do it together. And you need to remember that God is at the end of that rainbow. And just keep going. The old slaves used to say it this way: walk together, children. Walk together, children. And don't you get weary, because there is a great camp meeting in the promised land. And that's how you keep doing it. You just keep taking up that cross. And when you fall down, somebody else pick it up. And somebody else take it from them. It's like a relay race, and you keep going. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, man.
Hi, my name's Jada. I guess this kind of follows this question. Did you ever have doubts about whether, God is real or not?
Yeah. I'm now, different people have different doubts. I've never had the philosophical doubt about God being real, but I've had doubt about where are you when we need you? That's more my struggle. And we all have different ways of struggling with that. And the truth is, that's being human. I mean, actually, if you read the Psalms in the Old Testament, they're all prayers, but they get mad at God. They actually do. I mean, if you read, and it's right there in the Bible, which is really wonderful because it makes me remember, I can get mad at God. Just tell him. Trust me, God can handle your anger and will love you through it all the way. And the truth is, that's what a real relationship is about anyway. You can be honest and truthful with somebody you really love, even if you disagree with them. And you actually find that in the Bible. And I mean, I got to keep my answer short, they're telling me, so I'll keep them short. But that's like telling a preacher you can't breathe. But anyway, but the truth is, if you look at Jesus before he finally decided, I'm willing to sacrifice my life, if that's going to help people know that love is the way. I mean, God, the Father didn't make him do it. That wasn't about that. Jesus decided to do it. But there's actually a scene in the Gospels, in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he's really wrestling. I mean, he's like saying, he actually says in the Bible, I don't want to do this. And he finally says, not my will, but thine be done. And he finally just says, I'm going to do it. But he had to wrestle with it and wrestle with doubt. I mean, I have a sermon I've never preached. The title of the sermon will be, It's a Good Thing I'm Not God. And the whole message would be, what if Michael Curry had been in the Garden of Gethsemane? If I had been in the Garden of Gethsemane like Jesus, I would have negotiated with God. And I would have, because see, I really wanted to be a lawyer once upon a time, and so I would have negotiated with God and said, I'm probably not the best sacrifice. Have you considered Simon Peter? He really would be a good offering. But I think what you have there is, in the Garden of Gethsemane, you have Jesus wrestling with a very human doubt. Is this going to work? Am I going to give up my life for nothing? Will it change anything or anybody? And finally, without knowing absolutely, it's a leap of faith. He says, Father, I'm going to trust you, even if I don't understand you. And that's when he starts heading toward the cross. Well, that's what all of us do. We wrestle with it. And that's actually quite normal. Thank you. What does the M mean?
Oh, I play soccer for Medford High.
Oh.
So.
Oh, right. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Hello.
My name is Sarah, and I have a question about God got disabilities. Do they?
Does say it one more time?
Disabilities.
Does God have disabilities?
Yeah.
Yes. And let me tell you why. God made us all of us, everybody in this room, and we are all different. And yet the Bible says, with all of our differences, we're all made, it's in the first chapter of Genesis, that everybody is made in the image and likeness of God. God is like you, and God is like me, and God is like we. Does God have disabilities? Yes. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
My name is Isabelle, and I was wondering how the different stories in the Bible have like their different opinions by each person who writes them.
Yeah, they actually do. There are different opinions in the Bible, which means God actually listens to different opinions and wants us to do the same. And it's another way of saying it takes the whole village, because God is so incredible. I mean, we're talking about a reality beyond any of our understanding, that it takes the whole village. It takes many voices. It really does. For example, in the Hebrew scriptures, there's actually a debate between the book of Job and the book of Deuteronomy on why do bad things happen to good people. And both of those books, I won't go into the details, but they actually debate with each other. And God lets that debate happen because it takes many voices. In the New Testament, it takes different voices just to tell the story of Jesus, which is why you get Mark. I like to talk about Mark as kind of like USA Today. It's kind of, y'all look at USA Today, it's like real quick, and it's just like it's almost like a Twitter feed. It really is. It's just like, it's real quick, and you get this Twitter feed and all this stuff. And then you get to John's gospel, and John is like a preacher. He tells the story about Jesus feeding these people 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish. And then Jesus goes on in these long, by the way, I'm glad you like the bread, but I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will not hunger. Whoever believes in me will never thirst. And he goes on and on and on. He raises Lazarus from the dead. And so you would think everybody would just go, glory, hallelujah. And then Jesus in John's gospel goes into this long, I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. Whoever comes to me will not. He goes on. And John is very different. He's poetic. He is the poetic side of Jesus. Matthew is the Twitter side of Jesus. And then Matthew is kind of the Wall Street Journal. It's got a lot of stock options and prophecies in it. And then Luke is the left-wing revolutionary of Jesus. And it takes all of those voices. It takes the whole village to tell the remarkable story of Jesus. No one story can do it. And that's true in life. And that's why the Bible has many voices to help us hear the wondrous, glorious, incredible things of God. Thank you. 5 minutes. Okay. Yeah.
Hello, Bishop. My name's Jaden. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to...
Thank you. Thank you.
I was just wondering if there were any sports you played and what sports you played when you were a kid.
Oh, in sports. Yeah, well, yes. It's probably more accurate to say what teams I was on. I was on football team, playing, and if you mean by playing in the actual games or in scrimmages or in practice, oh yes, I was right there. Baseball, Little League baseball and all that kind of stuff. But I became a lifelong dyed-in-the-wool, as you know, Buffalo Bills fan. Again, the team that the Patriots practice on before they win the Super Bowl over and over and over again. But I'm a big football fan to this very day. Now I don't do any particular sports. I do go to the gym, and I work out, but my wife says, you go to the gym like some people go to church. Just because somebody went to church doesn't mean they worshiped. So I like to attend gym. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Fiona. And so I was wondering, I'm going to college in the fall, and I was wondering what kind of advice you might have for staying centered and focused on faith and what's really important during really transitional periods in your life when there's a lot of distractions.
That's fast. It's helpful. To find, depends on where you're in college, but there's probably some community of people, religious community. I'm guessing there's a Christian, it depends on the school, of course, but some kind of either campus ministry or something, but some community of people who, like you, are trying to live a life of faith amidst the swirl of change of going to college. And I would just encourage you to find that community and to kind of root yourself there. And I can't tell you exactly where it is because I don't know where you're going and don't know, but I know it's there. Mm-hmm. And that helps a lot. And that's and the other thing, but you already know this. When I was getting ready to go to college, my daddy told me, he said, when you go off to school, you remember treat everybody the way you want somebody else to treat your sister or your brother. And, I remember thinking, oh, man, you just, okay, yeah. But he was right. Just treat everybody the way you want somebody else to treat your own family or the way you want to be treated. And that's the way of love. And you will make it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Stephen. My question is, do you think Jesus should have been a woman?
that he should have been?
Yes. Do you think Jesus should have been a woman?
he could have been, had he been born in a different time and place, he could have been. I mean, they didn't have Wonder Woman then, but we could have her now. So, I think the truth is, God kind of, I don't want to speak for God, but my guess is God was coming into the world in a particular time, in a particular place. And so God figured out what is the best way I can come and get the message across. And if that way had been a woman in a culture where that would have worked, I think God would have done it. But in the particular culture and time where Jesus was born, it probably took a male figure to do it. God wasn't necessarily in favor of that. He was just trying to, how do I get the message out? But I really do believe that Jesus could have been a woman, just a man, in the right circumstance and time. Remember, God is spirit. And spirit doesn't have gender. Well, actually, the Greek word for spirit is feminine. It actually is. Yeah, in Hebrew too. But spirit's not even binary. Spirit is spirit. It's not male or female. Spirit embraces us all. And that's where God's heart really is. He just made a practical decision. Okay, I'll put a guy in there right now. I think that's it. Thank you.
I think we're going to have to run. I think you need to move on.
Okay.
I'd love to listen to you.
I know. Well, I'll tell you, what was your question? I'll do the three who are standing real quick.
This is to build off of the royal wedding question, but how did you get the opportunity to be the bishop at the royal wedding?
It was the couple. They made the decision back in January, before the wedding, January or February, and they had been doing their premarital counseling with the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he actually did the baptism preparation for Megan. And in the course of their conversations, they said, somebody has to preach. And normally, it would have been a British bishop, but because she was an American, they said, this is an opportunity to maybe do something different. And so they asked for some names of possibilities, and he gave some names, and mine was one of them. And my guess is their staff did their research, and they went on YouTube, and they talked, did all of that. And they said, well, let's bring this guy, see what he'll do. And then Archbishop called and said, would you do it? And I said, well, I'm normally busy on that date, but I guess I can. Yeah, and that's really pretty much it. Yeah, quick.
My name's Nicholas, and my question is, what would you say to someone who's not fully sure whether they believe in God but would like to?
Somebody who would?
Who's not fully sure whether they believe in God but would like to. What would you say to them?
You know what? And I'm not ducking the question. Follow the way of love. And the way of love for others and yourself, it will lead you back to God. Because the source of love is God. The Bible says God is love. That'd be my advice. Okay, the next two. Okay, yeah.
I don't have a question, but St. Paul's would like to.
Oh, wow. Oh, thank you, St. Paul.
Hi, I'm Charlie, and I was wondering, so I know you lived through the civil rights movement and how before it was normal to be racist, and after now it's like prejudice against you if you are like racist or something like that, or prejudice against people you're looked down upon. And so how do we change stubborn people's minds?
You know what? It's a good question, and I can answer it really quickly. I've never actually changed anybody's mind myself. I've never debated anybody into I mean, that doesn't mean you shouldn't debate or you shouldn't, articulate. But I do know people who have changed because they've been loved into changing. I actually do. With this, I'll stop. I was in one of our dioceses here in the United States, and I was standing in line greeting people after the diocesan convention banquet. And there was a big, tall, white guy with a big beard, and I saw him out of the corner of my eye, and everybody else was, taking selfies and laughing and jovial, and he was very serious. And I couldn't tell by his countenance what was going on or where he was coming from, but I was just aware of him. And eventually he came up and he looked me right in my face, and he said, I wanted to come up and I wanted to thank you. And before I could say thank me for what, he said, I just want to thank you for being my bishop or presiding bishop. I said, well, thank you, I'm honored. I didn't know what, and then he told me a story. He grew up, I don't remember what state, but he grew up in a family who were members of the Ku Klux Klan. And he went off to college and was living in a town in Arkansas at the time. And there was a little bitty Episcopal church there. And he said he went into that church and he started going there. And he had never heard of the Episcopal Church before. And he said all the religion that he had ever been taught, the Christianity he had been taught, was about hatred and bigotry. And he said those people welcomed and accepted him in that church knowing who he was. And he said they showed me the love of Jesus. And they loved me to health. And he said, that's why I just wanted to come up and say thank you for being my bishop. And I said, thank you for being my brother. Never argued anybody into changing, but I have seen people change because of love. Thank you, and thank y'all. Thank you, guys. Thank you.